Hi, and welcome. I'm the Reverend Dr. Cheryl Gaver, Presbyterian minister of 3 congregations in Eastern Ontario, and I'm also the questioning pastor. Today's question is, do Christians fear death? This is one that sort of builds up on the topic I was dealing with last week about, do Christians enjoy suffering? Is there a life after death? So we might as well ask, do Christians fear death? And the answer, like the other times, is some Christians do and some Christians don't. I may fear for myself, I don't fear death. I fear dying. I certainly don't want to suffer and I don't want to die in pain. But death itself, no. And the reason is quite simple. I do believe that there is life after death. I do believe in God's promises. I believe in some ways that this life is an adventure, is a preparation for what's beyond. And when we die, that's sort of when we are being born into a new life. And it's going to be a wonderful life. I won't have to worry about diet or health or work or what's going on with my friends, what's going on in the world, all the politics, all the disease, the suffering. I won't have to deal with any of that. I'll just be able to, well, personally, I think I'll be a few inches taller and thinner, and I'll be able to enjoy whatever food I want. And yeah. But the main thing is, I believe in God's promises that for those of us who accept Jesus, those of us who love God, will be with him in paradise. Now, part of me says, okay, but I'm not perfect and I don't deserve. Well, yeah, that's exactly what the gospel preaches. We don't deserve heaven. We don't deserve paradise. But God gives it to us because of his love, his grace, his mercy. Well, what if we still can't quite accept it? And that includes me at times. It's like, I know I should be trusting God. I know I should be turning over control of my life to God, but I can't quite. I want to hold on to that little bit. Does that mean that God's going to reject me? I don't think so. Does it mean I won't get into his presence or the fullness of heaven? Maybe. I think this may be where the idea of purgatory comes from, is that some people, they aren't ready for heaven and they need, well, purgatory is not a Presbyterian concept, so I really don't know much about it, but I can see that maybe there's a place where people need to be healed before they can get into heaven. And it can be instantaneous, but maybe they just need something slower. Paul talks in 2 Corinthians, he talks about, being transported to the third heaven. And so you get this idea, maybe there's more than one level of heaven. And certainly some religions talk about that. C.S. Lewis, in his book, in his series on Narnia, and the last volume was the last battle. And when the children are killed, they end up in heaven. And it's perfect and it's wonderful. And they're running and they're enjoying themselves. And they see something better. And they keep running. And they realize they've been going up and up and up. And they look back, and where they've been was heaven. But they look back and they realize they're now in heaven. So where they were before, it's like life keeps getting better. So maybe there are different stages. I think of people who have been hurt. Maybe they don't know love. They've been abused, broken. They've been discriminated against by courts, by whatever, by the church. And they don't trust. And they can't trust God. And God knows he wants them in heaven. They love, they're capable of so much goodness, but because of circumstances, because of whatever's gone on in their lives, they just can't. And I think of it like my dog. He was a rescue dog. And for the first few weeks, yeah, he didn't come up. I couldn't get near him. I couldn't, even put my arm in his cage, and I didn't try after a little bit because he would become vicious, actually. But it didn't take him long to come out of the cage, go outside, do his business, come back in. A neighbor actually said, is that your dog? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, he crossed the street and walked into her house and walked around and then came back. So I'm like, one, I don't know how he got out of the gate, but Chihuahuas can pretty well get out of anything. And two, he came back. And it took time. And before his tail would wag when he sees me and stuff like that. And I assumed something like that is going to happen with us and God. With people who've been really, really hurt, they may need that time of healing. And so maybe something like purgatory does exist. That's not in my theology, but who knows? I leave that up to God. So no, I don't fear death. And if I'm wrong, and if there's no life after death, and I'm nothing, that's fine too. I won't have to worry about food, diet, health. I'll have no worries. So I'm okay either way. But there are many people who are afraid of death. And they're afraid, even Christians, because they're afraid they're going to go to hell. I'm sorry for them. I'm sorry they don't know what love is, that they've never experienced unconditional love, that they have trouble accepting that, yeah, they're right, they don't deserve it, but it's theirs anyway because of God's grace and goodness. And yet they're terrified. They can see their faults, their sins, all the things they should have been doing. All the Sundays they should have gone to church and didn't. All the times they should have helped neighbors in need and didn't. All the times they should have been reading the Bible and didn't. And they can give you lists after list after list of everything they've done wrong. And when you're talking with someone who loves you, I think, and it's my personal opinion here, I think it is important that we can recognize that we're not perfect, that we've made mistakes. But when you're dealing with someone who loves you, the mistakes themselves don't matter. I remember asking one man, you really believe that at the last judgment, God is going to get out this book and go through every mistake we've ever made in life and hold us accountable to it? And he said, yes. I said, okay, so when I was a year old, I punched my mother in the mouth and knocked out a tooth. And years later, when she told me about it, because I certainly did not remember doing it, she said, I wasn't just flaying my arms. It was, I got a fist and I whammed it very deliberately, hit her in the mouth, knocked out a tooth. Did my mother ever hold it against me? No, she didn't. Do I think God's going to hold it against me that I punched my mother in the mouth when I was a year old? No. Why not? Because of love. Now, granted, my mother did hesitate giving me hugs for a long time. She wasn't a big hugger and I'm not a big hugger. And, she just sort of kept her distance a little bit. But it didn't stop her from loving me. It doesn't stop God from loving us when we make mistakes. Do we want to punish ourselves? Maybe God is going to give us the chance. Says, okay, you want to punish yourselves? You think you deserve to be locked up? Okay. But it's not for eternity. Because sooner or later, God's going to come knocking and say, have you finished punishing yourself? Will you please let my grace come in and give you the mercy that's yours? The hardest thing in life is to learn to not be afraid. And that is one of the key phrases that shows up in the Bible over and over again, especially in the New Testament with Jesus. Be not afraid. Fear not. Jesus came to show us what life without fear is. And for those of us who can experience it, even in small doses in our life today on earth, we have a glimpse of how wonderful it will be when we get to heaven. And because of that, we don't need to fear death. Thank you. And once again, I'm the Reverend Dr. Cheryl Gaver, and have a great day. Take care. God bless. Until next time.